Is the party over in San Francisco? That's what I'm going to be talking about tonight, and I want you to make a decision as to whether or not you agree with me or not. So give a listen and tell me what you think. So my thought of the day is the party over in San Francisco? To me, I drive around San Francisco every day. I'm in every neighborhood. I meet people all over the city constantly. And I've noticed something lately. People aren't smiling as much as they used to. They get in the car, they sigh, or I see people walking down the street, their heads are down, kind of, and they all seem a little more depressed. They seem a lot less happy to be living here. When I do get them to talk, a lot of times they're ranting about the rents in San Francisco, which, as we all know, are crazy. The rents are ridiculous in San Francisco, and they just seem to be going up right now. I mean, back in 2002, my wife and I were living in a 2-bedroom house, not an apartment, a house, in the outer Sunset, and we were paying $1,300 per month. Now, I just saw that house is up for rent again for $5,000. Finding an apartment I did see a couple, I did a search, and I was able to find a couple of places that were under $2,500 in the city, but they were because it was a 2-bedroom apartment or it was an open room in a house. You basically were going in with roommates for that much. Typically though, for 2-bedroom apartments, you can find, there are a few for about $3,500 or less, but they're usually in neighborhoods that not a lot of people would be that interested in, especially people who come to San Francisco because it's the hip, cool place to be. The houses where the hip, cool people want to live, or the apartments, I should say, those are all running around $4,000, $5,000. I even saw a few for $6,000, and that's crazy. And when you're working, even if you have a high-paying job, and you're shelling out $72,000 to $96,000 a year for rent, that really doesn't make it that surprising when you read news like about a month ago. There was an article in the paper that said a family of 4 making under $105,000 per year is considered low income in San Francisco. That's nuts. The only people that I do see smiling and happy are usually older. They're in their 40s, at least. And the reason I think they're smiling is probably because, back 15, 20 years ago when my wife and I first got married 20 years ago, you could buy a 2-bedroom house out here in the Sunset District for around $200,000 to $215,000. You can't do that anymore at all. If you did find a house for that price, it pretty much was a wreck. But even that's not true, because there was a house out here that squatters had moved into, pretty much destroyed the place, and it still sold for $1.2 million. There was nothing left in the place. They pretty much gutted the entire inside and rebuilt it after they're shelling out $1.2 million for the place. I don't see people going out as much unless they're older. Older people, they've got the extra money because they got themselves set early on, and they can go out to dinner on a weekend. They might go out to a concert every once in a while. If they're, I was going to say if they're younger people, but now that I think about it, they're about my age, which makes them older people. A lot of my friends that are going out to concerts are in their late 40s, early 50s, because they have the money to afford it. The millennials, the younger people, it's really difficult. First off, if You're a programmer, the techies that everyone talks about who make all the big money. You are essentially a salaried employee. Normally, you're only salaried if you are managing people, but for some reason in California, they passed a law that let computer programmers be salaried. So you get a flat rate, you don't get overtime, none of that. So these guys are at work for hours. I remember a tech company I worked at, sometimes I worked late nights there, and my day would end at 10. There were still guys sitting there working. The place had showers in it, in case people couldn't go home, they could at least take a shower there. And that's kind of crazy. There are stories of tech companies that have cots and beds for people to crash overnight, meaning they get to sleep for 2 or 3 hours and then get up, hop in the shower, and then get back to their computer and start working again. This is not healthy for people. And when you're not healthy, you're not happy. Now, obviously, things like this have happened before. Maybe not as bad, because honestly, right now, some of the wages, if you're not a programmer, that companies want to pay you are the same wages I was being offered back in 1988. And in 1988, seriously, I was making $15 an hour, living with one roommate in a 2-bedroom house in the Mission for $800. I was going down to Costco buying flats of filet mignon steaks and eating those almost every night. Actually, the only reason I was doing that was filet mignons were the only thing I really knew how to cook, but still, it was affordable on $15 an hour. $15 an hour, you really can't afford much of anything anymore today. I mean, gas is more expensive, food is more expensive. If you go out to a bar, even drinks are more expensive. We have the thing now with people were talking about $4 toast. Now they're talking about $18 avocado toast. They're more like exotic looking sandwiches, or people are adding gourmet and artisanal before whatever the food product they're selling so they can jack up the price. I mean, this is a really crazy time period, and people are starting to it's getting too much for them, and they're starting to explode. There are lots of techies now that are leaving the Bay Area because they can find they can go to another city, get paid a little bit less, but pay a whole lot less for rent and food and entertainment, and actually have some free time on their own. Now, is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, for a lot of people, it's kind of a bad thing. I mean, there are really good things in San Francisco that happen. We have Outside Lands. We have Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. Hey, this year at Outside Lands, it was just announced The Who is going to be playing. I mean, to me, okay, they're in their 70s, but still, it's The Who. I mean, that's a historic band. And maybe some of these guys will actually find a way to get some time off work to go see some of these bands. Maybe. But still, even Outside Lands is ridiculously expensive. Everything is expensive. Things like this have happened in the past. Maybe not as bad as they are today, as I said, but it is going to change. It's never going to go back to the good old days that lots of people like to talk about. I know my mother, when she was alive, she used to talk about how when I was a kid, I used to pay a nickel for a candy bar. Well, I never paid a nickel for a candy bar. It always cost more for me, but for me, I can remember when I could go out to a nightclub with 20 bucks in my pocket, get in, drink, and I used to drink a lot, and come home with change. I mean, there used to be, $50 draft beer specials up until 11 o'clock. Or they'd have dollar well drink specials. You don't see stuff like that anymore. Or if you do, they're really watering it down. You can drink like 15 of those and go, well, I don't even have a buzz yet. Things will change. It's a little painful right now. It's a little painful for a lot of people because it's so expensive. And there are some ways around it if you know where to look. And I would love to tell you the places to look. But unfortunately, I go to these places and I don't want to have to stand in line for an hour to get food. on those rare occasions when I go out. I know the Buy Right Creamery in the Mission. The lines have been so long, you could literally walk from that Buy Right Creamery over to the Buy Right on Divisadero and get your ice cream cone, walk back before you would get through the line to get your ice cream there. Or even better, if you want the Buy Right ice cream, you don't go to the ice cream shop, you go across the street to the Buy Right Market and you buy a pint of it. You know, maybe a pint's a little too much, but you get it faster. Carry a spoon with you, you know, eat it, share it with a friend, have a pocket knife, cut the thing in half, and both of you share it. Do something like that. That I will give you. I don't live in the Mission anymore. There are deals around if you can find them. You got to keep your eye on it. But there are a lot of people that came here. I called them long-term tourists. When 5 years ago, I would meet these people, they were right out of college, and they would say things like, you know, my daddy sent me to San Francisco, got me an apartment, and gave me his credit card, and he's giving me a year to make something of myself here. And all I could think was, oh great, Daddy is just giving you a 1-year spring break. Let's see what's going to happen when he starts seeing those credit card bills. It wasn't as expensive 5 years ago as it is today, but still, it was expensive back then. Now it's even worse. And it's really coming to a head, and more people are trying to get into San Francisco. And if you will excuse the odd euphemism I'm using here, San Francisco's kind of like a pimple. And the more people that move in, it gets bigger and bigger, and eventually it's going to burst, basically, and just like spit people out all over. And they're just going to say, I don't want to live here anymore because the cost of living here is not worth what I'm getting. And then things are going to go down. We're already starting to see rents going down, which is great. And hopefully that'll keep up. For right now, I do think there are tech companies that have been here for a while that are starting to leave themselves or move to other places in the Bay Area they think will be cheaper. So I won't say the bubble has burst, but it is starting to deflate a bit. It's gonna come back again. I mean, we had Web 1.0 back in the late 90s where everything was going crazy and nobody knew what they were doing and investors were throwing money around like crazy. Now investors are smarter and it is working out, but it is also getting these companies to have to pay a lot of money for people to work there. And really, in my opinion, the landlords jacking up the prices because when you have people with a lot of money, they aren't supposed to do this, but there are some cases where people are actually offering more money. They're bidding to rent a place. I haven't heard of that happening lately, but that was like a year or two ago I was hearing that happening. Change will come. It will be painful, but for right now, I kind of do think the party is over. And hopefully, I doubt everyone will go home, but when a lot of people go home, it'll be kind of fun to be able to walk out on the streets and actually go out to lunch and go out to dinner and not have to wonder how you're going to pay the bills the next day. What do you think?